you know, what that means is that there's an inequality pushing people at the higher end. So the last myth that I kind of forgot is this low-wage workers and the poor and other vulnerable populations are to blame for the financial and economic crisis. And I don't have a lot of graphs and data for that. No, they're not. It's kind of my answer. But in the end, this is about more than numbers. This is a debate about fairness and about rights. Do we believe that there's poverty in Puerto Rico? Because there are people that believe that there's no poverty in Puerto Rico. It's just people chilling in their couches getting welfare. They're not really poor. They're not the kind of deserving poor that we remember. Really? So first, do we believe there's poverty in Puerto Rico? Or do we believe that Puerto Ricans are the richest poor people in the world? Or the richest poor people in Latin America? That's nonsense. There's real poverty and hunger in Puerto Rico. Just take a walk to places where you normally don't walk, and you'll see it. Now, a place looks pretty because there's a lot of mirrors, and $72 billion later, lend $72 billion to any Latin American country, and you see buildings pop up all over the place, and the place looks pretty. But we're screwed for that because it's a mirage. We don't owe that stuff. We don't own it. We owe it, and there's a big difference. So are citizens entitled to a minimum standard of living? To opportunities for a better future? If people are entitled to food assistance, then why complain that they get food assistance? If they're entitled to housing, why complain they get housing? If they're entitled to healthcare, why complain they get healthcare? Those things should not be part of the comparison. Oh, it's too generous because people in Puerto Rico can get food, can get welfare, can get housing. Why are they complaining about? Hell, you know? So how should social resources be allocated to provide for that standard? The last slide I'll put is this one, which is, the money being made in Puerto Rico. The thing is, who's making the money in Puerto Rico? And I divided the population into 5 groups of 20%. Let's call them the bottom 20%, the next 20%, the next 20%, the next 20%, and the top 20%. And then I took the cake, and I said, okay, how much of a dollar, that's 100%, would go to each of those percentages in terms of the money that's being made in Puerto Rico? Well, guess what? The bottom 20% of people in Puerto Rico will get a penny, 1 cent of that dollar. Out of every dollar that's made in Puerto Rico, the bottom 20%, that's about 760,000 people, get a penny. The next 20% get 8%. So the bottom 40% in Puerto Rico make 9% of the money. That's about 1.4 million people, 1.5 million people, make 9% of all the money. Third and the fourth, let's go to the top 20%. They make 55% of the dollar, right? So the top 20%, those 797 privileged families that come here with a suntan telling us to work harder to sustain them back in Puerto Rico, right? They're fine. They're making 55% of every dollar in Puerto Rico, that top 20%. I compared it to the US households and the US families. And the bottom row there is the top 5% of people in Puerto Rico. They make 25% of all the money. So 95% of the people eat 75%, and 5% of the people, the top 5, eat 25%, and the top 20% eat 55%, more than half of the pie for the top 20%. There's still 80% of the people we have to feed with what's left. And if you just take the top 40%, forget it. You have 14 plus 8 plus 1 to feed 60% of the population. You see where I'm going, right? Problem in Puerto Rico is inequality, and it's who's making the money, and we don't hear anything about that in any of these reports. Why? Because the elite in Puerto Rico doesn't want you to hear about any of this stuff. They don't want to tax themselves. They'd rather tax you here in the US so you can pay and support the population over there. And they'd rather come to you here with a sing and crying and barrilito tres estrellas. So they can say, yeah, we want you to lobby and solve our problems here in Puerto Rico, whereas we don't want to tax ourselves and we're not going to make the hard decisions to pay what we need to pay to support our population and stop stealing the money, which is kind of what they've been doing. So let me finish there with a kind of caption contest. And I'll let you figure out where the story ends. Okay? Is the Puerto Rican diaspora going to continue to play this game of doing whatever the elites in Puerto Rico want us to do so that they can maintain their nice standard of living while the rest of us work here at rear ends? Or are we going to start demanding some rights as a diaspora and say, okay, we'll help you. How about giving us a couple of senators in that Puerto Rican legislature you have there? How about giving us some representatives at large? So that we're not town mayors, we're not giving out cement or bricks to people. We're there for transparency and accountability. But we don't do that, right? And we let the Puerto Rican elites tell us, oh, you left. So you have none to say here. Well, we support our families, we support it. Who supports the airline industry, the rental car industry, the hotel industry, the restaurant industry in Puerto Rico? but if not us. So if we don't have a right to go tell our brothers and sisters there to put their crap in order, then I don't know who does. And I think it behooves us to have that kind of attitude, because not having it has cost us dearly, and it's going to cost our family, friends, and relatives in Puerto Rico a lot more. Thank you.